Well, the Dogs were the surprise packet for 2024, breaking a finals drought that stretched over nearly a decade. How did they do it, and what are they capable of going forward? This is the season review for the Canterbury Bulldogs. All right, and to break this down for me, zero tackle analyst Darren Parkin. Darren, 2023 they were 15th. This year, 6th.
Yeah,
good jump.
An amazing jump. I think it's 400 and just sort of doing the maths, 427 point turnaround in terms of their offense and defense. And to put that in perspective, so last year they were ranked last defensively, but they were about 100 points worse than the next worst side in the competition in terms of points conceded. This year ranked third behind Penrith, who have been a defensive juggernaut for 5 years, and the Sharks that basically broke even with. There was a 2-point difference between those two sides. They were better defensively than the Storm and the Roosters, who obviously finished top 4. Their offense improved. They sort of jumped by about, I think it worked out to be about 2.5 points a game or thereabouts. But still ranked 10th there, so obviously they can work on that aspect of their game. But it's an enormous turnaround. So actually it was about 4 points a game more that they actually scored, but about 14 less defensively that they were giving away. Went from 97 line breaks to 127, so they went from 17th to 7th. From missed tackles, they went from about 41 a game down to 35, and conceded 98 line breaks after 134 the year before. So as much as they'd be frustrated with the way that they went out in the finals, they improved out of sight, really.
Yeah, some absolutely fantastic numbers there. So let's take a look at the 2024 pass mark. All right, so coming into 2024, if you're a Bulldogs fan, you'd be happy to just be knocking on the door of finals, let alone actually making them.
Yeah, it was a really good recruiting push for them. I think the expectations coming in were a bit unusual in that people weren't quite so sure. I mean, they snapped up a heap of uncontracted utility type players. Gus Gould trying to reinvigorate that group. Number of players that could sort of plug holes and fill a heap of different roles. They started pretty slowly, lost their first couple, and they looked at a very good chance to win their elimination final after that against Manly, but the Sea Eagles caught fire late. So they coughed up a chance late in the season to finish top 4 when they lost their last 3 home and away games, but they've laid a really good foundation, and it's more than a pass mark for them.
Yep, absolutely. Easy pass. All right, so in terms of what went wrong for the Dogs this year, you touched on it just before. The low light was probably that last month for them.
Yeah, it's a funny one because at the start of the year, if you offered everything that happened, then every Bulldogs fan signs on the line and takes that as far as they can. But you kind of feel that they might have left a tiny bit on the table just over that last month, and it's strange how those expectations change. They had a blockbuster against Manly in about round 24 on a Friday night, which they lost. They then got belted by the Cowboys and then lost another game the following week, and then were in a winning position in the elimination final when they rejuvenated themselves. So they would probably feel that they were capable of winning at least one final, and that would annoy them a little bit. And then obviously the Josh Addo-Carr saga towards the end of the year, with the drug test drama and subsequent dismissal from the club, and that was never going to be a positive for them. And so that was probably, I mean, we'll touch on that a bit later on in the headlines segment, but a little bit of a downside to the way it ended for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move to the highlights. All right, so the Bulldogs' defence probably the main highlight this year.
Definitely became robust and powerful, scored a lot of magnificent long-range tries. We spoke earlier about how they improved by 336 points defensively to become the third best team in the competition in that space, behind only the sides that finished second and third at the end of the home and away season. If you look at some of the individuals, Jacob Carraz, dangerous as any outside back, played every game, scored a team-high 12 tries. Connor Tracy came over from the Sharks to fill the fullback role. His pace was extremely damaging and caused panic in the opposition. Bronson Cherry played 19 games, 10 tries. Obviously served a fairly substantial drug suspension, so coming back from that, he really built a bit of momentum. And on field, probably the highlight of the season, we spoke about them breaking the finals drought. They also hadn't beaten the Broncos at Suncorp in nearly 10 years, and they belted them in round 21. By that stage, they had a real full head of steam up, so people expected that they were motoring towards finals, but that was the real, this is a bit of a juggernaut type side. I think they'd only lost twice in 11 weeks prior to that, so that was the underlining moment for them.
Absolutely. All right, let's roll on with the most improved and standout players. All right, so for most improved, we've got Steve Crichton.
Yeah, I think identifying young leadership, often you see with some of the great leaders in all sports, is that they'll get highlighted at a very young age when they're not the most experienced player in their team. But, I mean, he'd achieved a lot by 23 years of age in terms of, big game experience across the competition, but arriving at the club, launching them into the finals, being named Captain of the Year at the Dahlia Medals, Steve Crichton certainly gets that gong. 4-year deal, so he's still got a lot of football to deliver. Very young, and he, deserves a stack of accolades. And another new recruit in his second year at the club was Reid Marnie, 1,240 tackles, 91.58% efficiency. He got 70 in a game at one stage and over 50 11 times. So those two players, we spoke about their recruiting drive in the last 2 years. Players like that headlining it for sure.
Yep, great numbers again. Let's move on to the headlines. And if there's one thing we know here at Zero Tackle, it is headlines, and pretty obvious one, I think, Josh Adokar.
Yeah, the timing, and obviously there were other layers to it as well. I mean, the 29-year-old tested positive for cocaine twice in September, was let go by the club. There were issues around transparency where senior management at the club felt that they might have been deceived or weren't told the full story, and media were reporting on certain things they knew that were denied by the player involved. That obviously happened in the lead up to a final as well, so he stood himself down from selection in that game. That's not ideal. You don't want that when you've got this euphoria around the place as you swept your way back into the finals. So everything about that was messy, but I guess the underlining reality is that it won't be their problem anymore.
Yep, absolutely. So let's look forward to 2025. All right, so heading into 2025, you'd think you'd pretty much just want to hold their ground.
I'd say so, because, it was unfamiliar territory for them, sailing in those uncharted waters, and they got themselves into a position where they were playing blockbusters and top four shaping games and didn't quite stand up in that. In a final, they were in control but didn't put the opposition away, paid the price for it. It's great experience for them and great learning opportunities for those young players. So I think for them now, it's not going to be unfamiliar anymore. So if they put themselves in those big moments, how do they handle it this time around? So they've got to obviously avoid what we saw with the Warriors, where they leapt their way up and then a million things went wrong and they fell over. I think they've certainly got the capabilities to avoid that, and they can be a very, very dangerous team.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that wraps it up for the season review for the Bulldogs. Darren, thank you. A pretty exciting year for Dogs fans.
Yeah, you had to like everything that they put out there. It's been a long time between drinks for them, but I don't think it's going to be a flash in the pan. They should be fighting around the mark for a little while to come.
Yep, absolutely. So let us know in the comments if you think the Bulldogs can find another level next year or stay thereabouts, hold their ground. Remember to like and subscribe. We'll be doing season reviews for every team this year, and we'll also be looking ahead to 2026 and who your team should be targeting. Catch all the latest NRL news at zerotackle.com.